Welcome to Aging in Place Strategies and Answers with Linda Priaulx. Will it be possible to remain in my home as I age? Do I feel safe in my home? How do I figure out how much support I will need when my health needs start to change? What if I decide to move into a community instead? Which community will meet my needs now and in the future? Who will play a role in helping me with decision making? Do you ask yourself these same questions? Aging in Place Strategies and Answers can help you gain practical knowledge that will help you create your own Aging in Place roadmap. If you are already a care partner, a power of attorney, or in crisis mode with your Aging in Place strategy, you will learn what you need to know that you don't know. For over 20 years, I have been marketing Aging in Place services to clients and educating families and healthcare professionals in how to put aging in place strategies into place. When you utilize aging in place, you are allowed to choose where you want to live and make those decisions so that you can retain your quality of life. Welcome back to Aging in Place Strategies and Answers podcast. And I hope that you have had the opportunity to look at part 1 and part 2 of my series on dementia. I talked about the importance of consulting your physician when you recognize that there could be signs of cognitive decline. I also talked about the various kinds of testing that could be done during those appointments and whether or not it was going to be covered by your medical insurance. And then I also spent some time discussing why it is important to get a diagnosis so that you can plan well while you have the opportunity instead of having your hair on fire and then trying to plan. Well, today I have someone with me that I think you're going to love hearing their story because that was the pattern that they followed when they recognized that their mother was beginning to have some signs of cognitive decline. And so I'm going to introduce you to Debbie Mahler. And Debbie's son and my daughter are married. And so I'm so grateful for Debbie and her family and the opportunity to get to know them. And especially that my daughter is so happy being married to her son. But I was called in to help them just to discuss what could possibly be helpful when Debbie's father started to age and was experiencing some physical decline. And they said, Linda, we're just so confused. We're trying to navigate this on our own and we're just not really sure. Would you mind coming over and talking to myself and my mother and see what you think and maybe kind of give us some guidance? So Debbie, say hello to my listeners.
Hi, everyone.
We're glad you're here, Debbie. Do you remember that visit where I came to the house?
I certainly do, and it was a turning point for us. It was the relationship that Linda and I had that I realized that she had the experience that we did not have and that we needed. And so, we asked her to stop by and just for a visit. And it was just outstanding. My dad is was a very big, large man, over 6'5", over 300 pounds, and physically was just unable to do much. And my mother, who was of average size, was trying to care for her. And Linda, during that visit, you advised us of so much that we weren't aware of that Medicare does provide. They provided a bath care person who would come in. My mother had been trying to bathe my dad, which was a scary thing. They also brought in just people to help my mom. In my point of view, it seemed like they helped my mother more with their care of my father than they actually physically or helped him, just because they took some of the burden off of her.
Absolutely. And I found that out for my own father as well, that when that home health nurse came and took my dad's vitals and said, "You're fine," and left, that both my mother and my father felt like, "Oh, good, we're okay." And so that solid reassurance that things are as they should be. There's no need to worry, panic, have anxiety, or wonder if I should be at the ER. And it is a wonderful option. And so I was really glad that I could be there to help Debbie and her mom and dad. Now, later, of course, hospice was called in to support the family, and Debbie's father was able to pass at home. But today, Debbie's in a different situation with her mother, who has been a widow for 10 years. Debbie's mother is very social. She has a great way of being with people and talking with people, shows that she's actively interested in who you are, has a great memory. She was always very active in her church, but like many, had to socially isolate during the pandemic. And we know that social isolation isn't good for any of us. For the senior especially, and of course the results, the numbers coming out of the pandemic, we understand that isolation was devastating. So be aware that social isolation, there are dangers to our mental and physical health. We're going to take a quick break and hear from our sponsor.
The Neptune Society is the oldest and largest cremation service in the United States. For over 50 years, the Neptune Society has been proud to provide signature service to the families they've served. With a prearranged funeral plan, you can declare what you want done at the time of your passing, pay for it in advance, and not leave your survivors with the cost of your final arrangements. Call 314-266-2898. That's 314-266-2898.
Let's return to the podcast. So, Debbie, share your educational background and professional background.
My educational background is pretty much the norm: high school, college. My professional background, I had 35 years in the airline industry, but unlike what you may be thinking, it was not on an airplane. It was always in a sales capacity. And then following that, I'm currently an insurance broker. So again, a sales capacity type of profession.
Mm-hmm. And I had Debbie share that so that you could hear that she did not have a healthcare background. Okay. So don't panic. It's going to happen. Even if you do have a healthcare background, I had a doctor tell me I had no idea what it was on this side of the table. I've sent a lot of people home, but I had no idea what they were dealing with when they got home. So Debbie does not have a healthcare background, but you're going to find yourself in a role where you have to navigate the healthcare system for your parents and advocate for them. Has that been stressful or easy, Debbie?
Well, it's never easy when you have to switch roles with your parents, when you have to become the caregiver. The natural sense is your parents take care of you. But as we're finding out, Americans specifically are living longer now, and the roles get reversed. So it's not easy. But I have to say, I have been very blessed. I was blessed with both my parents. I think my dad led the way in that he actively engaged all of us kids in his issues and his care. It was whatever you all think is best, I will do. And now my mom's following that same course. I have 2 brothers and a sister, and she really relies on us. What do you think is best? And I'll do. And so in that way, we're blessed. I know some people have parents who struggle with them, are defensive against their suggestions. But like I said, our parents were very open to anything that we would suggest.
Mm-hmm. Have you found that when you have gone to the physician or doctors or hospital or whatever, that it's been straightforward and easy, or have you been had to scratch your head? Like, what are they really saying here?
Well, as you mentioned, I have no medical background, so I do spend most of the time scratching my head. But I like how you said that even doctors sometimes aren't experienced. I do think that, say for instance, Alzheimer's, you have to be specialized in that. So you may be a doctor and you may be specialized in pediatrics or,
Enterology.
Yes. That doesn't make you an expert in Alzheimer's. So I do understand that doctors also sometimes are left confused. And all I can say then, and this is something that I'm working on, and I think it's much different than from my parents, is it's okay to ask a doctor, what do you mean? Explain that again. I didn't understand.
Absolutely. So. Absolutely. That is very important. I'm glad you brought that up. So, Debbie has been navigating the health system for her mother because her mother did begin to suffer cognitively, as I said, and had showed some signs. But Debbie, what were some of the clues or symptoms or signs that alerted you to the fact that, something's changing with Mom?
Well, the frequency of her phone calls increased. I know I have something to do today, but I can't remember. Mm-hmm. Well, today's church day. You're going to church, or you have a doctor's appointment today. She started getting lost. I'd get phone calls at work. I'm at Target. I don't know how to get home. Or I'm here. I don't know where my car is. There were times actually she'd called me from the side of the road. I'm here. I'm on the highway. I don't know where. And then of course that was challenging because how do I find her? But I usually knew where she had intended to go, and so that gave me at least a zone to check. And then we would, what looks familiar? Look out the window. Tell me what you see. But that was increasing. We found her medicine in different places throughout the house. So there was just little things here and there that separately probably wasn't a big deal, but when you put them all together, the alarm did start to sound.
Mm-hmm. And I'll stop here just to say how wonderful technology is. When we took a family trip, we shared our phone locations so that everybody could find each other, and so we would know how far apart we were. And so after the vacation, I remember my daughter and husband talking over the phone, and my husband said something like, well, I don't really know where your mom is, but I think she's on her way home. And my daughter said, oh, I can see she'll be home in 5 minutes. And he said, how did you know that? And she said, well, Mom's been sharing her phone location with me since the vacation. But I did go into my phone and identify her as the person that, is local and can keep track of me. Because I thought, why not? I'm all over the city sometimes, but I just figured one step ahead, and then she'll be able to find me. So you know what, people? Technology is a beautiful thing. And somebody I was talking to recently had put a tracker on their kid, so an air tag, so that they could figure out where their kid was. So we've got all kinds of great technology that can help us now, but I just thought I would share that little tip of how technology can help with that when your loved one might call and say, where am I? So then your next step was the doctor's office. And it kind of came about in a kind of a different way, because normally I would say, well, start with your doctor, even if it's not a specialist, because our world is insurance driven. And so if you have a Medicare Advantage plan, you have very specific guidance on who you have to see first. If you have traditional Medicare with the supplement, you might be able to go to the specialist right away. So that's why in my podcast, I said, consult your physician. So how did you get to the doctor, Deb?
Okay.
How did that come about?
She had a previous visit about 6 months, maybe even a year before, where we actually did say things are starting to worry us. What should we do? And at that time, the doctor said, it's just dementia. And so on the second visit, which she made for herself, and I shared with Linda right now, I don't even remember what she was going in for. But the first thing was she got the days wrong, and she showed up on the wrong day, and you don't have a visit. And then she got her times wrong, and she got, I hate to say upset because my mom is a very mild-mannered woman. But even mild-mannered people, you can tell when their nerves are frayed or when they're just at the end of their rope. And again, she called, and I just don't know what's going on. And so I said, well, let me go in with you. And my ultimate goal was to mention to the doctor, I think things are getting a little worse. And so that's how we ended up going in the second time. And basically, the aide came in and talked to us first and gave my mom what's called a slums test, which is a test to test your cognitive abilities, which she had also done in December of the previous year. And then the doctor came in and greeted my mom and asked, "Are you still living alone?" My mom said yes. And she said, "People with Alzheimer's shouldn't live alone." And that's how we got our diagnosis.
And it was a shock, wasn't it?
Oh, we just both, literally, my mouth dropped open. And I said, "You haven't been in this room for 5 minutes. How can you tell me that she has Alzheimer's?" And it was the slums test. She had taken it in December, and then this one here, she said she's declined so much that it's obvious that it's Alzheimer's. I also didn't appreciate the uncaring way it was delivered to us. I guess she had assumed that we were on the page with her, but she didn't say, you'd think I have bad news or I think we need to talk about this, but instead she just said people with Alzheimer's shouldn't live alone. And
which is a hard way to begin a conversation. And so as Debbie has shared, and we know this, that training and giving a slums or any other cognitive test is important. Did they ever give you a copy of the test, Debbie?
No, they kept the test. But I should say...
But initially, did they give you a copy?
They gave me, at our first visit the previous year, they actually gave me the test and said, "Ask your mother these questions, but don't give her help." And I didn't have any idea what it was, nor did I realize the importance of it. I tried not to help her because they told me not to. But of course, if my mom asked for an explanation, I would explain it. I didn't give answers. And so in retrospect, that test wasn't accurate because A, I'm not trained in it. B, I had no idea what I was doing other than just reading it. And C, I'm her daughter. I helped her when she needed help.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we always say it's so important. We know that when masks are over the mouth, that we can't read lips. We know that someone's back is towards us, that hearing is impaired even further. When the slums was administered the second time, and again, this is just to enlighten and educate the audience listening and people who may be experiencing this. So that the person who is receiving the testing gets the best opportunity to show what they can and they cannot do. But in your instance, how was that slums given to your mom? Were you in the room during that time?
Yes, I was. And before I answer, I will say the best word that Linda has used here is educate. And I was not educated, and therefore I didn't know better. And of course, my mother wasn't educated either. We were basically just people sitting around waiting to see the doctor. And the person who, weighed her and took her blood pressure, which I think is just an aid. I don't believe they have any medical training, came in. It was a young girl with a sheet of paper. She sat at the desk. My mother sat at the table. So they weren't even face to face. She also had a mask on. And she also, in my opinion, spoke in a low register, but also fast. And so even though I was sitting closer to her than my mother, there were several things I didn't understand what she was saying. Not that I didn't understand the concept. I couldn't hear the words correctly. And the way I understood it, when my mother said, "Would you please say that again?" or "What did you say?" that she got marked off because she didn't understand. And it wasn't understanding. It was hearing that was the issue.
Right. And if you've listened to my podcast, I mentioned hearing and vision being key in getting that solved, because when we can't hear correctly, we don't know what people are asking. So then our whole world becomes one big confusing blob. And so hearing is very important to the testing process. But this is what Debbie had told me when we had a discussion. And I said, "Debbie, when I'm at that point in my podcast, I want you to come on and I want you to share your story." Because of this marital relationship that Debbie's son and my daughter had, I had heard Grandma has dementia. And then I ran into Grandma at the post office and I greeted her. Debbie's sister was with her. We discussed Thanksgiving, and Debbie's mom was telling me what they were doing for Thanksgiving and how excited she was. And I told her what, and she said, "Now, Linda, what do you guys?" I mean, it was a full conversation. Nothing that I would have thought that, wow, she's really struggling. I said to my kids, I said, "She didn't have dementia. She might be unsure of herself. She might lack some confidence, but I'm not sure of what the diagnosis would be." So then from that visit, is that when you decided to go to the neurologist and the neuropsychologist?
Well, yes, I was just so stunned by this revelation. I mean, I don't hardly even remember the rest of the visit, but I do recall the doctor did say, "Well, you need to understand it's the difference between the score on the first test and the score on the second test." And after the first test, when the doctor came in the room and found out I had administered it, she said, "Well, then it's worthless. We can't have a family member do this." I said, "I was told to do this." They never sent in anyone to do the follow-up. So I think it inadvertently got put into her charts. So, of course, even if the conditions had been ideal, I think she would have scored lower just because I'm untrained, of course. But she said, dementia is on a scale. And once you reach to a certain point, we change the diagnosis from dementia into Alzheimer's. And again, I just couldn't accept it. It just was too much of a shock for me to accept. And I said, "Is there anything we can do? There should be some more testing," because I knew this Slums test should just be thrown out altogether. And the doctor said, "Well, of course you can do some additional testing, but it really won't change the diagnosis and it won't change how we're going to treat her. Do you want to go ahead and do it?" And I did ask. Meanwhile, my mom's just kind of stunned. She's not really engaged at this point, which I don't blame her. I could hardly make myself be engaged. But I did say, is it severe testing? Is it painful testing? No, it's nothing like that. It's basically all psychological. And so we did. We weren't comfortable with that diagnosis. We weren't comfortable with the theory behind it. And we just thought we can go forward, but there's too many questions. So we wanted to do all we could. If the end result was going to be the same, well, then we would have confidence that that was what it was. But it was just too non-reliable.
Yes. And Debbie had shared with me that her mother was upset to hear those words, Alzheimer's, dementia, because she had friends with Alzheimer's, and that your mom's whole demeanor, she may have had some cognitive decline, but she certainly understood what was going on in that conversation and how that was. So how long was the testing that your mom went through when you went to the neuropsychologist?
Well, we were very fortunate. We got this plan. Go to this person, the neuropsychologist, neurology also, make these appointments. And we did. And initially with the neuropsychologist, this was in November. He couldn't see us until March. And thank the Lord. I had said, made the appointment, and I said, you know what? We're very flexible with our time. If you have a cancellation, would you please call us? And as I said, thank the Lord, we got in a week later. She called me up and she said, can you be in this afternoon? And I said, yes.
Wonderful.
Which was good because my mom didn't have, 4 months to worry and be anxious. It's, Mom, I'm on my way. We're going to the doctor. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, we went in then. It was rather quickly as far as from when we got the faulty diagnosis. And now I just buried the lead. I told you that her diagnosis was faulty, in fact. But we went in to the neuropsychologist, and it was a totally different atmosphere. It wasn't a doctor's office. It was more of just an office. And she and I sat together and visited with the doctor for a bit, which I think that was designed to help my mom relax. And we had told her, he had told me what the plan was, and I had shared with her, and he says, okay, I've got enough background. Would you please step out? And I stepped out, and it was just he and her in the office, and it was over 2 hours of testing, but it was very casual, very relaxed, very quiet, and they sat across from one another at a desk. And so she could. And if she said, I didn't understand your question, or what did you say? He repeated it. And our results were totally different when we got done. We went in with him. I had called my sister and she came up so we could be together, to bear the bad news that we thought we were going to get. But he said that where someone with Alzheimer's would score high, our mother scored low, and when someone would score low, she scored high. And he says she does have dementia, and she's got a good case. It's not light, but it's not Alzheimer's, at least not yet. And he said, what I think it is what's called white matter disease, and there is testing for that. And as we were sitting there and talking this over, and he was explaining, my sister and I were sitting on either side of my mom, and of course our attention was to the doctor. And at one point I looked over at my mom. I think something was said and she made a joke and laughed. And I looked over. Previous to this, without me really realizing, she was sitting in what you could call an old person slump, just kind of all down, folded in on herself, looking down. And then she sat up straight. She put her shoulders back. She got engaged. She made jokes and she laughed. And I interrupted the doctor and I said, Mom, your entire countenance has changed. Mm-hmm. You're back to you. What is it? She looked at me. Don't want to cry. She looked at me and said, I just found out I don't have Alzheimer's. Wouldn't you be happy too?
Mm-hmm. Yes. The importance of testing with the right people who have the training, pursuing that. Was this all covered under Medicare?
Oh, 100%, yes.
Perfect. So doctor visit, testing with a neuropsychologist and a neurologist who confirmed the findings of the neurologist. And now we're on the right track. We know what this is. White matter disease, for those of you who are listening, is an umbrella term for the damage to your brain's white matter, which is caused by decreased blood flow to the tissues. Okay. So now we have a concrete diagnosis. Now you have witnessed some changes that have been going on in your mom. How old is your mom, Debbie?
She's 87.
87. Okay. Living a good life. How did her diagnosis now? Obviously, we've seen a change in her demeanor. Everybody's taken a collective sigh of relief. We're okay with white matter disease being put into the chart so that people are aware. But how did that diagnosis then help your family realize what next steps needed to be, put into place to help her to be successful?
Mm-hmm. We were already pretty much decided, and this may sound scary that I didn't say we had already decided, but she was still driving at the time of the first doctor's visit and living alone, which I mentioned, and we already began the course. She didn't drive again after that day. We immediately took the car away, and we started making plans for her future home life. And at that second meeting, when she says, I don't have Alzheimer's anymore, then she said, can I drive now and can I live by myself? And my sister and I both looked at each other and said, no, we're not going backwards. We've already gone past that. We're going to keep on. And so we are blessed again that her sister was willing to move into a senior center with her. And they have separate bedrooms. They share a 2-bedroom apartment. We took over her medication because that was another issue that we felt wasn't quite right. And then not just on the medical side, but also on her financial side, we started working towards making sure all her financial needs are met and in order. So even though the initial diagnosis was wrong, it was a wake-up call for us, and it did, motivate us. Okay, we can't just be passive about this anymore. We need to, attend to things and make sure everything in her life, my mother's life, is as easy as possible, and we'll take on some extra responsibility.
Yes, and that's the beautiful thing. So then I believe her sister had lost her husband not too long before this next change. So she was ready to move. Your mom was ready to move. They found a wonderful independent senior living residence that is really pretty much equidistant between the siblings who come in frequently to visit. And how's your mom doing in her new environment?
She's doing wonderfully. It just... the whole thing, not even, the upgrade from the diagnosis, but since my dad had passed, and at that time it had been 9 years, her loneliness had increased to such a level, and she was very social, but she just kept backing away, and it happened so gradually, I don't think that we really noticed it. But when she went into the independent care, here they have activities for her several times a day. All she has to do is go outside of her door and she finds a friend. They play cards, they watch TV, they watch movies, they watch ball games. They just do so much there. And I think that swing, just her socialization came back. And she and my aunt are the same. They just seem to know every single person there. It takes us about 15 minutes to get them out the door because they want to say hello to everyone and, tell them where they're going and what they're doing. But that was, any regrets, I would say, would be that we didn't put her into a senior facility sooner, just for the social part of it. My aunt wasn't ready to go, so, of course that weighs against it. But if you're on the fence about having one of your parents go into, it's not the old nursing homes that I grew up with.
No.
It's just really, it's vital, energetic. They care for people, and they're very unintrusive. They don't bug them, but if they need them, they're there. And it was just probably one of the best things we've done for our mother.
Which is great. And Debbie's mom is in independent living. It is not a licensed community. So as you say, you guys are coming in to offer the support that's needed. And then she has her socialization. And if you think it's a bunch of hooey, it's not. This socialization and isolation is a big deal. And it really can affect our mental as well as physical well-being. And it needs to be addressed. So, Debbie, I always end my podcast with a caregiver tip. Okay. You've been a caregiver. I've been a caregiver. There's people out there that are listening today that are care partners. What would you share with them on, what would you want a caregiver to know that, from your experience?
Well, I think caregiving or caregiver is kind of an encompassing word. I think you can actually divide it into 2 separate categories. First of all, you need to be an advocate. At least for my mom and the seniors I'm associated with, as I said earlier, they're less inclined to question a doctor. They'll passively accept a bad diagnosis, and not really move on. After Linda's visit with us initially, I kind of switched from being that passive person to being more proactive, a proactive person in trying to help my mother. So advocacy, I look at more as doing that, stepping up, talking to the doctor, doing your research, asking people with backgrounds that Linda has, asking other people, asking your friends going through this, what's been beneficial to you and what should I avoid. But then the second part of caregiving, I think, is more internal, more personal, and that's watching out for their well-being, their mental state, their attitude. And for that, we encourage our mom a lot. We push her a little. Let's do this. So I don't feel like, well, let's do it anyway. But when she does do things, remember something, she'll remember something I've totally forgotten. I acknowledge that. Or she'll say, let's go do this. Oh, that's a great idea, Mom. Good idea. Thank you. Thank you for thinking of that. Or how could you remember that? That's so fantastic. So, we're trying to keep her mental spirits up as much as, her physical health.
Absolutely. Encouragement means so much to folks with dementia. Some people think, oh, well, they said that wrong or they've got the wrong day. I'm going to make sure that they know that this is the right day. But what we're doing and what you are telling us to do, which is so valuable, is to celebrate the things that they're doing well. Celebrate and encourage what they've done well. The rest of it doesn't matter. That's what families and advocates and care partners do, is they kind of pick up that load as it gets dropped, and it looks perfect looks perfect to the person who has dementia. It solves a lot of problems. You don't have a lot of arguments. But I would also say that Debbie and her mom, as well as myself and my mother, had good relationships, healthy relationships. And she looked to her kids to say, help me in this. You guys, I trust your knowledge, and I know that you want my best interests. So I'm going to let you help me through this. And my mother did the same for me. So there's a lot in that caregiving picture. But Debbie, I can't thank you enough for sharing this today, coming and sharing and being transparent, and then helping listeners to know that there's a place to begin. But if you don't feel validated or that you receive the right information, it's okay. Just spin and do the next best thing. But I think that preparing, because my listeners know that I'm a big advocate for being proactive, being in this stage where she's someplace good. And then if something would happen next, then you'll know what the next thing is to do for her. So again, I thank you for coming and being with me and with my listeners. We never know what information we're going to need or guidance that we need. So I want you to continue to listening to Aging in Place Strategies and Answers. I definitely would love for you to tell me how I'm doing. Leave a review. I would also think that you are talking to somebody in your life that's going through what I'm talking about, and you're getting the opportunity to have 20 to 30 minutes of professional guidance and expertise, and something that you're probably going to be experiencing as a care partner. So let's continue to be together on a regular basis, and let's get educated. Thank you for joining me today. Please remember that this podcast is intended as guidance and not advice. Share this podcast with friends and family who are currently in crisis mode, or with people who would like to start developing their own roadmap for aging in place. Listeners, if you would like a deeper dive into a topic discussed during a podcast, please subscribe to Aging in Place Strategies and Answers, where you will be able to access premium content. Or if you would like to suggest a topic for this podcast, please contact me at linda.agingstrategies@gmail.com. As always, I value the time you spend with me.